All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this morning. We are here with Chaplain Colonel Bob Hart. He is the branch chief for the U.S. Army Chaplain Corps. Thank you for attending this webinar this morning. We thank you everybody that is dialed in, that is watching on Zoom and on Facebook Live. Just want to give you a little bit overview of how we're going to do this. In just a few minutes, we're going to start asking Chaplain Hart some questions. He's going to tell us about his story, his journey to the U.S. Army Chaplain Corps. And at the end, we're going to have an opportunity for you to ask questions. Anything that is just burning question that you want to ask, if you would just post those questions in the chat box, and we'll get to as many of those as we possibly can. If you have questions about the Chaplain Corps specifically, questions about the process, how you start that journey to the Chaplain Corps, then if you put those questions in the chat box, we have several recruiters that will be happy to answer those questions with you. They'll post their information there in the chat boxes so that you can contact them directly and ask any specific types of questions about how you start this journey. With that being said, I'm going to introduce our special guest this morning. As I said, Chaplain Bob Hart. He is the branch chief for the Chaplain Corps. He is a graduate of both Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary and Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. He is a chaplain endorsed by the North American Mission Board. Chaplain Hart has had just a very long and amazing career. He's done a lot of very cool things. He has been the course manager for Chabolak. He has worked at the schoolhouse training up new chaplains. He has worked in personnel. He has just done quite a few things. He is prior enlisted, joined the Army first time back in 1982. I won't tell you how old I was. I was born. I will say that. Chaplain Hart, we are so glad to have you here this morning. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this and to talking to our folks that are considering a call to ministry. We have quite a few different people on here. We have some that are watching on Facebook Live as well. We have folks that are at the very beginning of that journey that are just kind of considering a call to the Army chaplaincy. We have some that are already in the process. As I look through our participants here, we have several folks that are already in and have been in for several years. So I'm sure that you're going to have something great to say to all of them. So, sir, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
First of all, glad to be here, and greetings to all from sunny South Carolina. We're at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Yes, the chief's office has migrated. Half of it has moved south, so we like to refer ourselves as Pentagon South. So just enjoying time there. So telling a little bit about myself, I'm married to my lovely wife, Diane. We've been married for 34 years. We have two grown-up great daughters, Rachel and Sarah, and some folks that are on there will know them as little ones and young teenagers, and now they're full-grown adults. And Sarah just graduated from college, and Rachel is finishing up her master's work in British Columbia. So doing a lot of great things out there, and very proud of them. So been an Army chaplain for 25 years, and next year at this same time we'll be calling it done. The Lord has been saying it's time to move on to bigger and better things, and so we're looking forward to what the next chapter of life is going to be for Diane and I. So looking forward to that, and just glad to be with you here this morning and take an opportunity to share and hopefully answer some questions if those that are feeling called to the chaplaincy, and help you understand that calling and develop that calling, as well as prepare yourself for the great ministry that the Army chaplaincy is all about.
Thanks, sir. So to start us off, could you tell us, so as mentioned before, you were prior enlisted back in 1982 when you came in the Army. Tell us about that journey. How did you move from young man in the Army to, wow, I want to be an Army chaplain?
Oh, yeah, a long, great story. What, the Lord did with us there is I did join the Army in 1982. That was under some older folks would understand what's called the 2-for-2 program. You gave the Army 2 years of service and they would help you pay for 2 years of college. And so looking at and needing money, that is not a bad incentive to join the Army. It, helps many of folks get that way. But it was in that process of joining the Army, being involved, coming on to active duty, seeing a lot of young men and women in search for answers and looking for answers in a lot of different ways. And one of the things I did notice is that the Army chaplains were there to interact with those young folks, to be with those young folks, to help them answer some of life's tough questions. And the Lord kind of used that in my life as he was dealing with me of going into ministry, as that was an area of ministry that I could relate to, that I knew I could be effective and I could minister to these young men and women that were joining our armed services, particularly the Army, and just to share the love of Christ with them and let them know that God does care about them, and that even in the midst of all the changes and transitions that Army life brings to a young man and young woman, that God's there for them and able to take care of them. So that started a very long journey that would take over 7 years from the time I got out of the Army to going back to college, going on to seminary. In between that time, was also involved in full-time ministry. So there was almost a pause of almost 3 years as I was an associate pastor, and then moved on to seminary. And then after seminary, as most of you know, that maybe in the process is the Army requires you 2 years minimum postgraduate, full-time work, in the ministry. So, got called to a church in Florida, was serving there until 1996 when the Army called and said, how would you like to come on active duty? So even there, that was a long time ago for some folks, 96. So.
Well, very cool. So you were talking about feeling that initial call to ministry as you're working with young soldiers, and then it's that 7-year process to get you to be able to seminary, the experience and all that. So that can be kind of daunting for some people. How is God moving in your life through that process?
Well, I think, the great thing is God always has a purpose, and you've got to trust, what he's going to do. Sometimes you have to go through what I call a wilderness experience, if you will, still involved in ministry, still taking care of people, still, but learning, what it means to be a minister, what it means to be a pastor. And having that mature aspect is, most of our folks come in, chaplains are a little bit more senior than the rest of the population that they're ministering to. But it's in that maturing process that God is giving you to develop and to grow and to mature and, and to learn those kind of things. And so sometimes it takes time, obviously, to get the, college, under, to get graduate time, to go to seminary, and, different denominations and faith groups have different timing on, how long seminary is. For me, it was 3 years. There are some folks out there that, go to seminary much longer than 3 years. But those are requirements that build and mature us so that we can be more effective ministers, especially in the chaplaincy, because you need to have that maturity, you need to have that growth, you need to have that understanding, because you do have young men and women and couples that are looking for you to give them good, strong spiritual counseling.
So how is God confirming that call as you're experiencing this call? You understand what the military is like, and you're preparing for it. were there any like signposts along the way where you could say, yeah, God was just confirming that this was really what I was supposed to be doing?
Well, I think, along the way, we knew we needed to have, 2 years postgraduate work of full-time ministry. And, and I was open and honest with the congregations that were looking at us for in view of a call, is saying, hey, we feel led to the calling of, the Army chaplaincy. And if they were okay with that, and that understanding that, that was one of the things that was important that they understood is, this is going to be for a season of life. And then, if the Lord wills and the Army calls, we'll respond to that call. And the age, as you get older, you start getting concerned about those things, but the Lord will always kind of give you those benchmarks that say, hey, this is the next step. Do you trust me? And that's what it became, is a matter of faith and trust that God had a purpose, God had a plan, and I just needed to trust him that he was going to work it out. And just keep moving forward with those kind of things. It can be a very long, daunting process, 7 years for Diane and I, going through that process. But those were all good years that we could look back on and see how God was developing us and preparing us for our future ministry in the Army chaplaincy.
Very nice. It sounds like it takes a lot of trust for you and your family. It also takes a lot of trust for that church too. Sounds
absolutely. Like. And I think, those that are married, I believe your spouses should be involved in the process, of understanding that calling, because it is a family dynamic as you go into that ministry, and so it becomes vital that your family is plugged in, they have ownership. And that was one thing growing our two daughters, is we always encourage them to be involved in the ministry that we were involved in. So when dad was preaching, when dad was in chapel, the girls were in chapel with us and enjoying, that time too. So we really see it as the entire family's involved in the ministry.
I'm glad you said that, sir, because we have a lot of questions about family involvement and what that's like. And we always encourage our folks, hey, this has to be a family decision, because it's a big life-changing thing.
It is a big life-changing decision. So,
well, sir, so I was going to ask you, so, and you don't have to worry, because I don't think Chaplain Soldier has signed on it, or at least I haven't seen his name on here or anything. So you've had a lot of assignments, right? Yeah. What has been your favorite assignment? And I know that the obligatory answer is usually, oh, my current one, this is the best assignment I've ever had. But
which it is. So, and that's a difficult question, because from my opinion, all assignments are great assignments, because assignments really are around people. There are some people that are on that I knew from my very first assignment to time in Germany, time in Hawaii, even, did a 1-year remote in Korea. That was a great assignment. The ministry was fantastic. And I get people upset. I used to, when I was the Chabolik course instructor, I would tell them every chaplain needs to go to Korea, and people would be like, oh, why would you say that? And it's like, because the ministry is so effective, in touching the lives of soldiers in that area. Soldiers are hurting, soldiers are away from home. There's lots of distractions, lots of things that can get them into trouble. And the Army chaplain is there to care for them, to spiritually mature them, to help them, walk through some of the, the booby traps of life, if you will, that they'll experience. So Hart, great assignment. Yeah, the current assignment I'm in, it has been great, but we have really thoroughly enjoyed every assignment that we've had. So, to boil it down, hard to say. Even we've got friends on there that we knew in Heidelberg, Germany. great assignment, great ministry, wonderful congregation that we had to grow. But the difficult part of that assignment is we had to close Heidelberg down because the Army made a decision to move United States Army Europe Command up to Wiesbaden. And so that required us to do it. So it was very difficult because, you watched a community that was vibrant and thriving and that community closing down. And so the ministry is not to only getting to know those great people of that community, but to minister to them in their pain as they were in that transition of life. And that's a lot about what the chaplaincy is all about, is meeting soldiers and their families where they're at in life and ministering to them at that point of need that you find them in.
Yeah, I distinctly remember being a scared second lieutenant at Chaplain and remembering that. And then also the videos with the monkeys. Yours too. So you've had a lot of different assignments. Obviously, Korea and in Germany with some of those unique challenges. Can you just flesh that out a little bit? Some of the unique challenges that we face as chaplains, some that you've had to deal with.
Well, obviously family separation is a unique challenge through deployments to Iraq, through, going to Korea, to just, going into normal training. That can be a difficult time. That can be a challenge. And so you really, need to invest in your family to encourage them along the way because they're going through that too. And obviously, as you're going through that and experiencing that, well, guess what? Your soldiers are too, and their families. And so that's kind of the unique challenge that we have is, finding those soldiers where they're at in their station of life, if you will, and meeting them at a ministry need and taking care of them where they're at. And that goes across the board. So part of that same challenge is, as you come through in the Army chaplaincy, guess what? We're not all Baptists. We're not all Methodists. We're not all Episcopalians, And so getting to learn how to work with not only other denominations, but other faith groups as well. We have Jewish chaplains, we have, Muslim chaplains, we have Buddhist chaplains. And guess what? It takes the team to work together with those folks. And so one of the things I used to tell, and you may remember from when, my time as the course manager was, part of the Army chaplaincy, the challenge is learning to play nice with others and share your toys. So, a lot of people don't get that, but that, it means, hey, we're here. We have one mission together as a worldwide Army chaplaincy, serving our soldiers in the United States Army and their families, wherever they may be, whether it's in Afghanistan, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in Korea, whether it's in Alaska, you name it. You're there, you're suffering with them, that you're going through the same challenges that they're going through. And by that, when they see that you're there and you're caring for them, that opens up the opportunity for you to pour into their lives and to share the love of God with them at that point in time. So that's really the key is we work together. It can be a challenge at times because we don't always see eye to eye on things. But you develop those, working relationships, and look for common ground so that you can encourage one another in doing, and helping them do their mission as they help you do your mission.
Yeah, I like that. Sharing your toys, learning to share your toys. That's a great way of putting it. So right now you are the branch chief.
Yes.
Could you explain sort of what that job is? What's the scope of that position?
Wow. Okay. It's a unique thing that the Corps always had a branch chief. The problem is we've not always had a person in that job as the branch chief. So usually that job has been dual hatted at the whoever the Dach Per is right now. That's Chaplain Matt Kreider is the Dach Per. And so my job is to be the advisor to the chief on chaplains on regulatory and statutory guidance as it applies to the Chaplain Corps as we deal with recruitment and accessions, as we deal with personnel and assignments from the gamut, from bringing them on once they've been accessioned to the time that they retire. And then the third vital component of that is advise him on reserve component integration, because we rely on the reserves quite a bit. We are one Army, and we come together and we really take care of one another to help our reservists. A lot of folks are in the reserves before they transition on to active duty. And so helping the chief understand, as he is the proponent of the branch, which means that he is the one that makes all assignments. My assignments officers, they go in with recommendations, but it is the chief that officially makes each and every one of those assignments. And so he's intimately involved in understanding who we're placing, because we want to make sure we have the right chaplain at the right place at the right time to, take care of our soldiers and their family members. So the branch chief takes all three of those organizations and synchronizes them and helps them coordinate together so that we have the very best in the Chaplain Corps that we can offer to our soldiers and their families. So that's how it begins. And so that's the branch chief's job, is to, make sure those three focuses are working interchangeably and working in harmony together.
So with that, the scope of the position sounds like it is very large. So you get a good kind of view of the whole Chaplain Corps.
Yes.
So with that in mind, like, what are some of the changes that you see, and obviously we're not going to hold you to it, but changes that if you could, read the tea leaves or whatever the metaphor we choose to use, changes to the Chaplain Corps coming, or changes to how maybe we do ministry?
I think that's going to be the key, is more of the challenges to ministry. Obviously, as we've starting to, come through this pandemic, that was a huge challenge to garrison ministry. How do we minister, just like the civilian churches were trying to figure it out, but the Army chapels were figuring out, how do we do ministry in that kind of context? So that's one challenge. Other challenges is the secularization of our society. You used to, almost count on kids that, kind of grew up in church, so to speak, and kind of, they had some kind of reference or framework. Well, not necessarily today. The young men and women that are coming in may not have ever darkened the doors of a church in the civilian world. And so they're coming, they're asking questions, and the unique opportunity we have as chaplain is to meet those young men and women where they're at and taking care of them and encourage them, answering their questions, and just walking life with them at that point in time as they're dealing. So those are some of the challenges that we're facing. And how do we become effective ministers with all of that's going on? The Army's changing the way that they do recruiting. As you well know, even in personnel, we're talking Army talent management, and how do we prepare people to be the very best at the job that they're finding themselves in. And so with that, the Army is investing highly into talent management and taking care of folks, and not a one size fits all, but maybe even some specialization, that chaplains can do as they move forward. That's a challenge, but it's a great opportunity that, we have, looking across the board of, hey, we've already talked about folks that can be, move from operational to training to garrison environments and all that's in between. But at the same time, how do we develop them so that they can move to the next level? Maybe the person has a gifting of being a hospital chaplain. Well, how can they stay in that hospital chaplain lane without it hurting their career? And that's one of the things the Army, just not just for the chaplaincy, but across the board, is looking at, soldiers specializations, and looking at those areas. So those are just a few of the challenges that we're looking at right now. There are great opportunities that we have in the Corps, and we're looking at helping our folks as they understand, hey, the new personnel assignment, how that works. How do they get involved? How do they help choose their next assignment and get involved with, their assignment officer? Those are the great opportunities. So instead of challenges, maybe those are just opportunities that we have.
So with that, so in the position that you have, since you see personnel and you see, again, from your career, the amount of time that you've had as a chaplain in supervisory positions, what are the characteristics that the chaplain corps is looking for? What makes a good chaplain?
That's a great question.
And I recognize it's loaded too.
At an essence, that the chaplain is available, available to his soldiers and their families, because this is not the Army chaplaincy is not a 9-to-5 job. If you're thinking you're going to, be at work by 9 and be off by 5, well, maybe you need to rethink your Army, calling, at that point in time. Just the nature of being a soldier doesn't allow you, so we want folks that have a sense of calling, understand that this isn't just a vocation, that it's not just a job, if you will, but it is actual a calling, and it's varied on what people understand what that calling and how they understand the calling that God has placed on their lives. But first thing we want to do is make sure that young man, young woman that's considering the chaplaincy is that they understand what that calling means to them and how God is using that in their lives, because they're going to face some difficult times. There's going to be times when you're in the heat of the jungle, or the rain of the forest, or the mud, or the sweat of the desert. And, you're going to have those moments where you think, why am I doing this again? And that's when you go back that, God has called you to be faithful, even in the toughest of times. And so as you understand that calling, that's what makes you stay and say, and put up with those kind of discomforts of life, that are coming up there, separations of family, that calling. So that's the first thing we want somebody to do, is we want them to be developed in the understanding of their calling, and understanding that they're going to mature from there. My understanding of calling when I came as a young private in 1982 has matured greatly in over 25 years of Army chaplaincy. So that's the first step. And then we need men and women that are professional of their craft. The Army is hiring you, so to speak, to be an Army chaplain. And so we want them to be the very best at that craft. And as they're developing themselves in seminary and in post-ministry work, we want them. So, take an opportunity, get in, even if you're not in a full-time job, get with your pastor or your church, and be involved in developing Bible studies, be involved in outreach, be involved in hospital ministry. Folks that are good orators, in their preaching skills. But however your denomination develops that you are developed in those preaching or oratory skills, or even just public speaking skills. So, because the large part of our job as chaplains is being able to communicate effectively to those young men and women. And so, however that is done, that you're good at that. So, professional work experience is important that you're doing. Another big piece of it, believe it or not, folks, is physical fitness. You know, the Army is a young people's game, if you will. And so they're expecting, and even though yes, you may be several years older than the population that you're ministering to, the Army's expectation is, hey, young man, young woman, chaplain, you need to keep up with the troops. And so it means take care of yourself physically. Make sure that, with the Army, another opportunity is you got a new PT standard coming. And so, know and understand the new PT test and how that's going to affect you, and make sure that you're ready to do that, and do that to the best of your ability. So that's a vital piece of it that people don't understand. And then spiritual maturity that's the other piece that we're looking for young men and women that have a sense of spiritual maturity and understand the development of their call, and then how they bring those gifts and graces that God has blessed them with, so that they can be effective ministers, in that, to those soldiers and their families.
So in just a second, we're going to have a time for asking some questions. So I just want to put out to the group here, if you have questions, please type it in that chat, especially if you're in the Zoom call here, and we will get to as many of those questions as we possibly can. I saw that we've already gotten a few in there. So Chaplain Hart, could you talk? We talked about the characteristics and the requirements for Army chaplains. Can you talk a little bit about what the board looks like? How does the Army make the decision? I would say look at folks on who we're going to bring in as chaplains.
So as many know, that as they go through the accessions process and they put a packet together, we're looking at obviously your grades. How well did you do? There is a standard, both in undergraduate as well as your graduate work. And maybe you had some struggles, in undergrad, but what the Army likes to see is that you've made progression. And if there was some challenges that life hit you with as you were going through your graduate studies as in seminary, then communicate that with us. Help us to understand, what were those difficulties that maybe life hit you very hard at that point in time. But the board understands that. And so if they see that and they see that, you've been working hard, that's what they're looking at. Again, obviously, professional work experience is another thing that the board's looking at. We expect young men and women that are going to be chaplains to already understand their craft, if you will, as a minister. Because as you come to what we call Chabolik, is the Chaplain Basic Leader Officer course. As you're coming to Bolik, we're not going to necessarily teach you how to be a minister. We expect you to know how to be a minister. What we are going to do is train you on how to be a soldier and how to be a good soldier in the midst of being a good minister at the same time. So, like I spoke about before, what are your preaching skills or your oratory skills or your public speaking skills? Those are important pieces that we're looking for at that point. Do you have an understanding of what God has called you to do, and can you write that down and make sure that people that are reading that understand that as well? So, developing that sense of call and being able to communicate that on a piece of paper is vital, to the board, because they're looking at that point in time. Each and every one that is coming to the accessions board has had an interview with an 06 chaplain. And that interview is vital. So don't, take it seriously. Make sure that you show up on time, look professional when that 06 chaplain is interviewing you, because they're writing notes and they're going to communicate to the board their impressions of you at that interview process. So make sure that, you take that seriously, and listen to what that 06 chaplain is giving you, because they're giving you a wealth of experience And they want to hear how God has placed this calling on your life and how you're going to reach out and take care of soldiers and their families. So those are the vitals for the board: professional work experience, good speaking skills, uh, uh, good grades, that they've done, and if there was some difficulties in life that they've been, challenged with, make sure. And then they're looking at that O6 interview and the impressions that O6 has talked to you about. So they want to see professionalism, they want to see care. I've done a few O6 interviews myself, and sometimes you are amazed at the very laxivity, if you will, that people will show up to those interviews. Not a good idea to show up in tennis shoes and flip flops and with somebody that is going to be talking to you and making an evaluation about you. So first impressions are important, and that's the same way. That board doesn't get to see, but that board is looking at your professionalism, your preaching skills, and making those evaluations on you. So those are the important parts that the board's going to look at. And then what they're going to vote on is, are you ready to become an Army chaplain, whether that's National Guard, whether that's the reserves, or that's active duty.
So it sounds like they're sort of looking for that whole person
They
perspective.
are. Very much. Yeah, it's a whole concept of the person. So well-rounded.
And who sits on those boards? Is it like who is making those decisions on these?
Well, usually we have either the chief or one of the deputies or the president of the board, and then senior officers from both the Guard, Reserves, and active duty are hand selected by the chief of chaplains to sit on those boards. And we do it on a rotation basis, so we're not having the same people sit those boards. And so what we do is the process is done actually through HRC, Human Readiness Command. And so what we do is we give them a pool of names, and they develop an OML from that pool of names. And then those from those names that's when the invitations go out.
Are they all chaplains, or is it anybody else? Or?
They're all chaplains for the accessions board. Promotion boards are different.
Right. So Chaplain Hart, we look at recruiting, right, and the folks that we're trying to bring in. Are there any changes that you see coming to the way that the Army is recruiting chaplains?
I think the Army's trying to be more open and making sure that diversity across the board is being is open to that. So they're looking at men, women, every ethnic background that you can think of, and they want to reach out and touch those people as much as possible. So one of the big areas for us is both in ethnicity as well as in gender. We don't have enough female chaplains. We need more female chaplains, to meet the growing, population that we're seeing in the Army. Ethnic, so we're looking at those different, groups to say, hey, we need folks of color to be involved as we take care of our soldiers and their families at the same time. So lots of opportunity, to do just that. But again, I go back to calling. If you believe God has called you to this, then be faithful in that calling and keep moving forward in what God has called you to do.
So we are going to ask Chaplain Hart some questions for those of you that are just joining us. I know some folks just jumped in. I think somebody that you definitely know just came in. And if you would type those questions in, we've got quite a few questions here already, and we will get to as many of these as possible. So if you'll type those in the chat, I'd be happy to ask them. So first question we've got is from Jason. And he wants to know, what are the three most important tasks of a battalion chaplain?
I would tell you task number one, we call it ministry of presence. Be where your soldiers are at. If your soldiers are in the field, then guess what, chaplain? You need to be in the field with them, wherever that, looks like. So that ministry of presence, especially when, the weather's bad or, whatever is going on, you're there, you're where your soldiers are at. Number two, like we've already talked about, know your craft. We expect you to be a soldier. Know your craft as a soldier and how to, understand what a soldier does, and make sure that you're there doing that. And then the third thing is relationships. Build relationships with your command, build relationships with your NCOs, build relationships with your soldiers and their families. Those are the three critical skills. You can't build relationships if you're not around. If you're an absentee chaplain, that's going to be difficult. So be where your soldiers are at, build those relationships, and then understand your craft, not only as a chaplain, but as a soldier as well.
Awesome. So Jason is one of our chaplain candidates that is applying for active duty, and so I'm sure he is excited about trying to be the best chaplain that he can possibly be.
Awesome.
So Jerome asked, what's the big difference between being a chaplain candidate and being a chaplain?
Night and day. When you're a chaplain candidate, you're still in seminary, or you may be just finishing up seminary. We developed the chief of chaplains developed the chaplain candidate program specifically to introduce young seminarians, those men and women that are considering the call to the chaplaincy. So it almost is a way of trying it on without fully being in it. And so, you're learning what it means to be a chaplain. You're getting those experiences as a chaplain candidate. Myself, as a chaplain candidate, I had opportunity to serve at a basic training unit, and that was, a great experience. I also spent a summer at Brooke Army Medical Center as a hospital chaplain. As a candidate, again, wonderful experiences, but that's what the chaplain candidacy is all about, is giving chaplains or chaplain candidates experiences so that they have a better understanding of what the ministries are like, so that they can make that informed, prayerful decision that, yes, this is what I want to do at that point in time. Because when you come on as a chaplain, then everybody's expecting you to know your stuff, if you will, and do the right things at that point in time. And that goes back to Jason's question about those three basic areas: building those relationships, getting out there and being with your soldiers, and and knowing your craft. So
the candidate program kind of has that feel of the training wheels, so to speak. And then when you become a chaplain, the training wheels come off.
That's right.
To do your job.
Well, if they don't totally come off, at least, when my girls were learning to ride a bike, we'd take one wheel off and let them go, so, but yeah, you're expected to, once you're on, hey, you know your stuff. You'll still have good mentors. You'll still have, good instructors that'll help you. Chaplain Pendrak was my first chaplain. That was my brigade chaplain at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and did a tremendous job taking a brand new young chaplain and mentoring and encouraging and teaching, what it meant to be a chaplain. So wonderful job.
Yeah. My first one was Chaplain Crowley, and he kept me kind of from falling many times.
Exactly. Hold his bike.
Yes. So we've got a question from Naveed. He's asking, can chaplains choose to focus more on humanitarian work, such as addressing homelessness, poverty, than the traditional minister role? and help run a church. So sometimes, I think the gist of the question is kind of, we get some folks that are doing sort of different non-traditional types of ministry in their civilian world versus the traditional pastoring or associate pastor of a church. So how does, I guess maybe how does the Army look at that?
Well, I mean, if I understand the question right, is that non-traditional work as a chaplain, they're going to be looked at to take care of those soldiers and whatever that ministry looks like. So, part of it is a twofold process with the chaplaincy. Is you are a staff officer, and there are certain expectation that your commander has of you as his religious, the person that is advising him on religious affairs for that unit that you're assigned to. So that's job number one. Second part is doing ministry, whether that be in a chapel setting or however that is developed. And that would be something that that young chaplain would develop with their brigade chaplain or their supervisory chaplain on, hey, I really feel called to taking care of this area. And they may use that as an outreach opportunity. But the core of it is you have a unit, usually a battalion. And as that battalion chaplain, your primary job is to take care of the spiritual needs of those soldiers and their families in your battalion. So the other part of it would be a extra, that you could add on and you could encourage and do, and maybe help even soldiers volunteer in some, parts of that type of ministry, whether it be taking care of homeless or a food pantry or whatever it might be.
So another one comes from Brian, and he's asking, do you recommend an additional civilian master's degree, such as resiliency, ethics, counseling, pastoral, in order to be better equipped to serve in the Army?
I will tell you, you will do more counseling in the Army than you've probably ever done in civilian life. I know that was true for me. And so if I were to go back, I would look at different counseling classes that would enhance my ability to minister as well as to counsel and to develop those skills the better way, to be a better chaplain in those areas. I would hazard the guess that, you will probably do 3 to 5 times more counseling than what the normal local pastor or, does, in that type setting. And the counseling runs the gamut from marriage and family therapy to, grief counseling to financial counseling. So it's varied, in those areas. So if there are programs that you can take in your seminary experience that will enhance your ability to be a good chaplain, take advantage of those.
So counseling is a very big deal.
It's a very big deal.
As you're saying that, I'm just thinking through some of the situations that I've counseled over the years, and definitely not along to that.
Well, and they change, develop from unit to unit. The issues that a basic training chaplain, would, need to take care of are going to be different than a chaplain that's in an operational unit, whether it's support or whether it's a line type of unit. They change, and so you can always get better at that craft. It's something that you can always hone your skills on.
So next one here is it's kind of a loaded question from Victor here, and he says, "How have you handled difficult supervisors?"
Well, again, it goes back to what I was saying with, learning to get along with folks, being nice, if you will, playing nice with others. All right. And learning to share your toys. I think that's that. So when those difficult supervisors come along, and they will, you do your best to be a team player with them. Obviously they're the supervisor, so they're the coach, if you will. You're the team player, so learn, hey, how can I best get along with this person to not just so that, your job is easier, but their job is easier also. So it may mean that you step up and take on a little bit more than you normally would, but it's because you're being a team player and you see your role is giving support to the overall team that's taking care of the religious needs of that area.
So kind of along those lines, sometimes we like to talk about the difficult supervisors, but Glenn has a really good question here, a little kind of self-reflective here. Have you seen a common theme that hinders a chaplain's success? So kind of looking at the individual, their own.
I think the theme that I've seen that has hindered guys and gals' success is being an absentee chaplain. You've got to be out there with people. Again, it goes back to what I'm saying. Especially the Army chaplaincy is, number one, obviously it's not a 9-to-5 job. Number two is that not only is it not a 9-to-5 job, but it is not a chapel centric job. The people aren't going to come see you. You're going to need to go to them. And that's part of the uniqueness that we have as Army chaplains is you get to go where they work and get to visit them at work. There's not too many jobs that I know that are out there where the pastor of the local church can just go down to the local factory and visit his parishioners, that work there. Well, guess what? The Army is paying you as a chaplain to go to the motor pool and visit soldiers, go to the field and visit soldiers, go to the range and visit soldiers. Wherever they're at is that chaplain's at, and that makes, all the difference in the world. So I think that's folks that have that mentality. Well, if they need me, they'll come to me. Yeah, that may be true in some cases, but most of the time they're not going to come see you, and then when life is hitting them hard and you're saying, well, why didn't you just come talk to me? Well, you might have done a little bit better job if you would have been proactive and went and asked them how they were doing first. So, and soldiers will also, they'll look, and they may not, answer you right away, but when they see that you're out there, that you're actively involved in what they're doing to the best of your ability, then that opens the doors for them to come with their questions, their concerns, their issues that they're having, because now you've earned the right to speak into their lives.
Yeah, thank you. That's really great point, sir. It really is so different than being in a local church. We absolutely have to be out there with folks. So another question that we've got here. We've got a comment here from Martha Ann and Gary. We are so proud of you. I pass that along. Link is asking about, I believe he's a chaplain candidate. Do AERs have a major impact on a session from the candidate program?
That when they say AERs, he's talking academic evaluation reports?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So they are considered, and what is written in those AERs are the board will look at, just like they look at that 06 interview, but they're looking at those other things. Those are just positives. If you've got, done well and you have an AER, then it gives the board just a little bit more information for them to look at and say, okay, this person's ready to come on, as an Army chaplain. So yeah, utilize them if you've got them. Make sure they're part of your board packet.
So We've got one more question here, and you may know the answer to this, maybe not. And I know it's still kind of flexing a little bit here, but what is the physical requirement scoring scale going to be for the chaplains under the new model for the ACFT?
Well, I think, it goes back, you got to score 60%, and I think you still got to get, the 300, but it's a little different with the new ACFT, scoring standard, because you have you have the different, and they're color coded. And so for chaplains, it's yellow, or what I like to refer to as the gold standard. All right. So, that's the baseline that the Army's looking for based on, what we do as chaplains. Now, my personal opinion, and I may get in trouble for this, but that's okay. When you go to an elite unit like the 101st or the 82nd or one of those, they're going to have their standards as well, and it's going to be higher than what's expected of the chaplain. So, and I will hazard the guess that there will be division sergeant majors that will say, this is the standard for this unit. We expect every soldier that is part of our unit, this is the standard that you will make at that point in time. Does it will it affect? I don't think so, because there is that standard, but it affects the way that we do ministry sometimes. If you're not seen as able to keep up with the troops, then that can be a negative. So that may get me in trouble. But it just, we even saw it with the old PT test. Everybody knew, hey, 60%, but hey, if you were going to 101st, 60%, you better be hitting 290. So as the score, that they were looking at. So that's, the nature of the job, because they know that being a soldier is hard work, and especially in very difficult areas. And they expect that physical ability to be at its peak performance.
Well, sir, we have been going for almost an hour here, and you have answered a ton of our questions, and I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this morning. For all of you that are logged onto the call, we are glad that you're joining us with this morning, whether you're on Zoom or watching on Facebook Live. If you are interested in exploring this call to ministry, this very unique call to Army ministry, please reach out to us. I know some of our recruiters have posted their information in the chat box. You can go in there and grab those numbers. You can message us through all of our social media platforms. We would love to have that discussion with you. The Army needs good men and women to step into this role of Army chaplain. So please reach out to us. We would love to talk to you. Sir, again, thank you so much for being a part of this morning. Really appreciate it. You come with a lot of experience and a wealth of knowledge that I know that some of our candidates or applicants, those considering the chaplain corps, are going to be grateful for hearing. And you were my course manager back when I was in Chibolik, and you're also my personnel manager out in Hawaii, and that was great. So it was great seeing you again this morning, sir. And thank you for everything.
Well, thank you for the opportunity in doing this, and let me just leave with a blessing for everybody that's on as they're considering the Army Chaplain Corps, and maybe even what they've done for the Army Chaplain Corps. So let me offer a word of blessing for each of these folks, okay? And our recruiters are very important that we bless our recruiters as well. So Lord, we do thank you for your love, your grace, your mercies to each and every one of us. I thank you for these men and women that are considering the call of the Army chaplaincy. So Lord, I just pray your blessings on them, that you would encourage their hearts, that you would open their minds to what you have for them. Father, for the recruiters that work with them, They would just pray your blessings upon them, encourage them, give them wisdom as they help these young men and women make the decision to answer the call and live the call to the very best of their ability. So Lord, we give you thanks for each and every one of them. Ask your blessings upon them. Watch over them, we pray. We ask this in your precious and holy name. Amen.